So, Jow,
Yes, sir.
sooner or later you finish an art project, right?
In
And
theory,
in theory, you finish it.
it's done.
And in theory, you want to share it with people, presumably. Or you just burn it, I guess. You could do that. That would be a different episode. That's
Or
not this week's episode.
You could pull a George Lucas and just stash it.
Yeah.
I think Coppola does that now, too. I think he makes films and just doesn't show anyone except his friends.
Prince also did that, and Michael Jackson did that as well, where it was like
I don't know if Michael Jackson did it. I know Prince did it. Like, there's a whole fucking vault of, like, movies, or not movies. Well, there might be actually movies, because Prince dabbled in that area, but I know he's got, like, albums that just weren't released, and he's got them in a vault, and I think there's, like, he had, like, a set schedule or something for how long after his death.
I love that.
I kind of love
crazy.
that too. That's the kind of Prince that I know and love, where it's just like, I'm gonna do what I want, and even in death, he's like giving the middle finger to the industry. Yeah, but so in theory, even in death, there is a plan of release or attack.
Right. You want to give that art its life, and its life comes from it being released like a virus into the world, and hopefully it takes off. Some viruses you don't want to take off, but art is a different kind of situation. Or in other words, memes. Memes you want to take off, you want to carry into the world and have their life. And so I guess today you and me had discussed potentially talking about how to release your work, right? How to
when
release
to
it
release
into the
your
world.
work too.
When. That's correct. And a timely one, because tomorrow, or the day after this episode is released, I will be releasing season 4 Trailer Park Warlock.
Woo!
So, I know, right? It's been, I don't even know how many months it's been now. It's been like 3 or 4 months of just production, which is always like, production is one of those things where it's like, it's very comforting and it's rhythm and it's, habit and routine. But sooner or later, there's a point where where I'm just like, I need people to look at this already. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You get to the madness of just making stuff and it not seeing the light of day, and you sort of start to wonder, like, what would happen if I died tomorrow and nobody saw any of this stuff that I've been slaving away at for.
And we need to clarify, there is a difference between testing and releasing, because testing, you're kind of fishing around for opinions to kind of gauge what the expectation is or what the perception is of what you've created. Release is, again, unless you're George Lucas, release is it's done. There's no touching it anymore. Yep. This is what it is going to be and forever will be.
Right, and finalization.
Right. So I'm curious. I wanted to ask you about this because tomorrow Trailer Park Warlock Season 4 drops on Webtoon. And right. I'm curious to know, I kind of know the answer, but I wanted you to maybe elaborate on it a little bit more. What goes into the decision-making of when a webcomic drops? I was going to say a comic because, usually those used to be weeklies, but right. But in terms of a webcomic, it's a little bit of a different beast, no?
Yes and no. I would say, so Webtoon is kind of unique in that there are seasons for comics, whereas, Batman has run monthly, maybe with the exception of what happened during COVID. But other than that, has run monthly like since its inception, right? It just keeps going, keeps trucking along, and they find a new artist or a new writer to replace so that they can keep the title rolling. Whereas with Webtoon, artists are given leeway to take breaks in between, where they think is a proper point to end on a chapter or whatever, so that they can have the time to recuperate and
live.
Yeah, and live and like create basically a new buffer of episodes. And that's mostly because with Webtoon, what's particularly unique about it is that it's very creator focused. So a title pretty much lives on its creator. They aren't getting replaced by other people. Like I'm it, as far as the creative team for Trailer Park Warlock goes, with the exception of my editors, who are awesome. But other than that, like I'm the main force that's moving it forward. So that is where they decided to have the system of like having seasons, which is very unique for comics. Instead of just having it just keep trucking on. And so that's why there are frequently, release dates for seasons. And typically the pattern for Trailer Park Warlock has been that I will release a season towards the end of summer. So kind of around when school starts a lot of the time. That actually, like, I would not say that that's particularly intentional because I don't think my reader base is like high school, which is like I would say the majority of the people who are reading on Webtoon. Mine's more college onward. So, college kids do have that summer break and, start back up towards fall. But, yeah, I mean, basically what determines the release date for me is sort of when my editors are kind of like, enough is enough. We have to release this thing. Come on. And that's basically just me maximizing my time to create and also my time to have a break. And that's usually about, I would say 10, I guess 12 to 15 weeks, between seasons. So that usually breaks down to like 3 to 4 months.
So it's really kind of based on like artist well-being as opposed to like a business strategy or anything like that. That's the real kind of driving force about like how it works.
I think so, and I want to, I think that Webtoon's trying to approach it that what's good for business is good for the artists, because if the artists are burning out, right? If the artists are burning out and constantly having to go on hiatus or whatever, it negatively impacts the readership. It negatively impacts their ability to generate income and all that stuff. So I would say on a certain level, it's kind of a work in progress still, because I've never really seen anything like this. And like, not to like toot my horn. Yeah, exactly. Not to toot my horn too much, but I've worked in print comics for at least like 3 or 4 years before that, and print comics is like, you just go. There's no stop. There's like no stop. You're lining up for the next project as you're in the middle of the one that you're already working on. So it's completely unique to me, this whole situation. For you, Jow, like how would you describe for you sort of the release schedule, between films or between, from what you understand, even like television?
Well, when it comes to filmmaking, because I consider myself a film guy more than a TV guy. I haven't done a TV thing yet, or like a series. It's something that I am considering. There is a lot that goes into it, mostly because I'm not trying to disrespect comics by leaving it out of this list, but this is the general mainstay. There's not really a big talk amongst attention seekers about when the next comic is dropping, which is why the Webtoon thing intrigues me, because that might be a frontier that starts encroaching on film stuff. But the idea has always been, it started off with, well, what other movies are opening when we want to open? And they base that around the summer movie season, which is when the tentpoles usually do it. Usually, the main driving force is, when do people have free time to spend? So in the summer, the kids are out of school, it's hot, the movie theater's air conditioned, it's a nice little way to sit everybody down, get them relaxed, kill 2 hours. So, obviously a lot of movies pump out during the summer. But then you also have things like the holiday seasons. Anytime there's some kind of a holiday, whether it's July 4th, which is like the creme de la creme of weekends. But then you also have like
Right.
Memorial Day, Labor Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Usually when kids and people have time off from work are targeted as like the pinpoint. So they look at those, they decide what the genre of movie is. I mean, obviously you're going to put, a lot of romantic shit towards Valentine's Day, some, raunchy kind of family comedy towards Thanksgiving. You're going to do the cheerful stuff at Christmas. It all has its place. But then they start looking at what other movies are releasing around that time, and they kind of try and figure out, well, I need to put mine here because when this Marvel movie comes out, it's going to steamroll everything in its thing. And if I can get a 2-week window at least where I'm not touched by Marvel, I can at least hopefully make my money back, and we'll go from there. But then things started changing in the landscape because there are different types of media now because of the internet. Everything is fighting for your attention. So, like I said before, Webtoon is going to start encroaching on that. And when there starts being like big comics that start, popping off big time, like we're talking like everyone, like it's in the zeitgeist type level, that's going to become a problem, and it's another thing considered. But right now, filmmakers no longer have to compete with just other movies. They have to compete with Game of Thrones, like when that was a thing. You know what I mean? If the season finale of Game of Thrones was coming on, well, you don't want to launch your movie that day. But now also you look at things like Netflix, who drop an entire season on like a Friday of Stranger Things. It's like, well, everyone's going to be binging for the whole fucking weekend. There goes my box office.
Yeah, it seems way more chaotic now because, also this has been a very unique year in the sense that we're now watching, like, movies are coming out in the theater that were like postponed by either a year or even multiple years due to the COVID pandemic. Mm-hmm. Like last night, me and my sister went to go watch The Green Knight. I think a movie that was originally supposed to be released on Christmas, because it is actually a Christmas movie, as it turns out. And for whatever reason, and I'd love to know why, they decided to release it, end of July, in the middle of the summer. It feels sort of out of place thematically. I guess because everything has been so strange, it kind of doesn't matter anyway. Like,
well, I think the COVID thing is really affecting things where you have investors who want their money back. At least they want to see something happen. And their mindset is, even if we have it in theaters for a few weeks when it's not touched, because right now outside of Black Widow, there's no really major releases going on as far as I've really kind of gleamed. You got Suicide Squad coming up, but you look at things, The Green Knight has at least a solid 2 weeks where, it's really the only game in town.
That's true.
And then they can throw it into VOD relatively quickly. And if they've got enough buzz from the theater, they can, especially with the whole Delta variant thing going on now. And I don't want to talk about politics, but there's potential for more lockdowns and all this kind of nonsense. So the idea of, we fulfilled our theatrical release obligation when in the window that we had. And now we can just jump to VOD and not have to worry about, Dev Patel suing us.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point, because you have no idea what's going to happen the rest of the year. So you might as well hit the accelerator now when you have the chance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they were planning it before, and they probably thought, Christmas in July, maybe we could spend it that way or whatever. But there's so many factors going into things right now. And then here's another thing, and this is a big thing that ties into. So like when you release a comic, it's out, it's done, boom, moving on. When you release a movie in theaters, then 6 months later, you have to drop the DVD, Blu-ray, Steelbook, da-da-da-da-da. So if The Green Knight comes out now and it's a Christmas movie, you're looking at a Blu-ray drop for Christmas time, possibly. And that's maybe what they're hoping to bank the money on, is that some people have seen it enough in the summer to talk about it when it comes to Christmas time. And Blu-ray sales will go up. 4K sales will go up. So, there's a lot of things that get considered. And right now, it's a little chaotic. It used to just be, oh shit, Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, or, the new fucking Halo is dropping. You know what I mean? That's another thing. Video games are now, because they take up a massive amount of time from people. You know what I mean? Like if a video game drops on a Friday, some kid that comes home from school is not going to want to go see a movie that's going to take 2 hours out of his life playing this new game. He's going to play through Sunday. And then...
You actually bring up a really good point, too, because this particular chunk of summertime is like dead air for most video game launches. So it makes sense now. I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, it makes sense if you're like a movie producer or whatever, and you're like, now's the time to do it. If we're going to release this movie, we need to do it now.
But it's weird because August, September is considered dump zone. That's dump territory for the movies that anything from like May, like what is it first? Is it Memorial Day or Labor Day first? I always get them confused.
I believe
it's Memorial Day, right?
Memorial Day. Yeah.
So anything from Memorial Day to July 4th is considered summer movie season. Anything in mid to late July is considered to be a late summer release. August is considered shit. Like, that's the garbage zone, which blows my mind because sometimes you have some really big movies coming out then. And it's the same situation because everyone is taking a vacation in August before they have to go back to school in September.
Yeah.
Same thing with work and all that kind of stuff. Same thing applies, it's common knowledge that January and early February are also dumping grounds. Why? The holidays are over. New Year's, Christmas, Thanksgiving. The time off is done. Everybody's back at school. Everybody's back at work. Their attention is spoken for by their obligations. So that's when all the junk seems to come out because, it's like, oh, well, we know we're not going to make a lot of money on this, but we have to release it theatrically. So boom, we'll jump it here. The interesting thing is right now, all that shit's up in the air because people have been home. People are, not going to school, not going to work, all this kind of stuff. If you don't have to go out and about, most people don't. And so they're staying at home and watching movies. So it's changing the landscape for now. I do not know what will happen once the pandemic is finally over, knock on wood, because we could very well revert back to typical movie-going situations, or the game has changed forever. And I know a lot of the studios are hoping for that, but as you can see, for those of you who are listening to this in the distant future, Scarlett Johansson, we don't know at the moment what's going to happen, but she's currently suing Disney over their Disney Plus release that interfered with the theatrical release of Black Widow because it's costing her ticket royalties. So we don't know what's going to come of that case, but the idea that you can drop a movie on a streaming service the same day it comes into theaters is in fact a game changer, but we'll have to see what happens and how they'll approach their theatrical releases going forward. Because if they can make the movie, they don't have to pay distributors at theatrical houses to show their movies. They don't have to split any of the money.
Yeah.
So why would they bother to do that? You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make any sense financially when they can just keep the lion's share for themselves. And they've gotten kind of a free pass to test those waters. And that's what's interesting about how that's going to affect release dates going forward. Because, if you already have Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, and Prime, right, you can just watch whatever. So if 6 horror movies drop in the middle of October, well, let's watch 2 of them tonight. We'll watch 2 of them tomorrow. We'll save the other 2 for next Friday or Saturday or whatever like that. And I'm only paying the $60 that I was paying already for the streaming service. But if I'm going to the movies, that's a ticket for me. That's a ticket for the wife. That's $20 right off the bat. Then there's a bag of popcorn. That's an extra $5 or $7. Then there's 2 sodas. You know what I mean? Like, times that by 6, you're looking at so much money spent. So it's good and bad because, the people are saving money. The studios are making the bulk of the money. But then as an artist, the whole communal experience thing that I love to give to an audience, that's going to start going away. But it's also evolving. And I don't want to keep ranting because I can see you ready to chime in.
No, because what you're talking about and what I was starting to think about that I thought was interesting to me is I had a question for you, which was that, so do you prefer being able to have an entire series, like the whole thing released at once, or go through the, periodic week by week release of something?
It depends.
Yeah.
So okay, if you take a sitcom type thing,
Yeah.
we'll use the example of Friends. Everybody knows the TV show Friends. I like that being week to week because that is not necessarily overarching storylines. It's not like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a situational
Yeah.
comedy. Here's the setup. This is the plot of this episode. Ross is moving into a new apartment. Done. Like, that's the thing. We're here for jokes. I can pop it on while I'm eating dinner. Done. When I'm looking at something like a show like 24, where there's 24 episodes and it's one big massive story, I like that stuff dropped all on me at once. I want to binge that baby. I just want, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to order food in. I'm going to sit there. I'm not leaving my couch. That's my weekend. And that to me is fun to be able to kind of, and I can stop it when I want to. That's the beautiful thing about binging. I like having the option of that whole, I don't have to wait. I have something I can watch. So the idea of that whole mass thing for one big story, it helps me keep track of what's going on. It helps me get invested better. You know what I mean? Like, so it really kind of differs as to what format is being told. And I'm not differentiating between like movie and TV. I'm talking about like different types of TV.
Yeah, for sure. Because you were talking about the communal experience. And one of the things to me that seems to better like foster that community experience is that periodic release format. I'm wondering if we're going to really see something like Game of Thrones for a long time, because Game of Thrones might have been the last time we saw like a big epic TV show that was released week by week. And because it did that, it had this huge communal experience. And maybe I misunderstand because I don't usually participate in them that much, where it's like, so like Tiger King dropped, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was this huge communal experience for a lot of people for like maybe a week or 2 weeks, and then after that fell off, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas Game of Thrones being released week to week for, I don't know, period of maybe a couple of months, it's this really like elongated, carried out event. And so it creates this, it's a different kind of mood, if you get what I'm saying, where it's like, when you come to the end of it, it's like coming to the end of a football season or something, where you're kind of exhausted once it's done.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I kind of think I tend to prefer that experience over the like, oh, something dropped, I need to binge it, while everybody else is binging it, or else I'm out of the loop. Because I am routinely out of the loop on basically all material. Like, I'm the kind of person who's like coming into the conversation about Die Hard 3 like decades afterwards. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? That fucking movie came out like 1992 or whatever, But
no, it's
anyway.
interesting. It's interesting because and this is the thing that I think that gets overlooked in the discussion about, like a theatrical communal release and like a streaming release, is the idea of a showtime. So when you go to a movie theater, you're all showing up for 8 o'clock. That's what time the movie starts, right? When Loki drops on Disney Plus, it drops at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And there's a couple crazy people who are up at 2 a.m. to hit play at 2:01 and watch it before everybody else. Everybody else kind of gets at it when they can, or when it allows them. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm on my lunch break, and Cindy's not here today to gossip with. Oh, I'll throw on Loki and I'll watch it while I eat my salad. Well, you've just watched it then by yourself. And this is a show that I watch and I tweet about all the time, so all my Twitter people know. But The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, where he hosts a double feature of like a horror, B-movie, sci-fi kind of stuff. He does it on Friday night, starting at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Shudder. At 9 o'clock, everybody knows, tune in, that's what time it's happening. We're all watching and live tweeting together. And it's a very different experience than the rest of the things where it's just like, I'll watch when I can. Now, granted, it does go on video on demand at some point and people can watch whenever they want. But the fun of it is tweeting along, watching these bad movies, you know, making fun of it, questioning what the fuck is going on, like all that kind of stuff. Having that discussion with people, you make friendships, you make connections. It's that communal experience that seems to be missing when you watch stuff in solitude. So the idea of a Showtime is what I really think is what's missing from that whole let's drop it on streaming or whatever like that. Because if you told me, okay, you can only watch Black Widow at 8:15 Eastern Standard Time, the next showing doesn't start until 11:30. I'm tuning in at, you know what I mean, at 8 o'clock, and everyone's tweeting, everyone's watching the same beats at the same time, so everyone's reacting in real time, and it's that communal experience. That's what's missing from the whole streaming problem, is that there's, and it was the same thing with Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, like, it was only released at 9 p.m. every episode. Like, so if it dropped Sunday night, everyone knew where they were Sunday night. Like, that's, you know what I mean? That's where the demand is. So if you want to continue the communal thing, you have to institute showtimes. And that's the thing that becomes that competition thing again, because, well, okay, maybe Game of Thrones is on tonight, but guess what else is on? The fucking Super Bowl. Shit. What, you know what I mean? Like, what are we going to watch? Yeah. Sometimes things are preempted and they'll say, hey, next week is a rerun, or we're not showing one next week because we're not going up against the Super Bowl. But sometimes they do go head to head, and it's like, well, I got to make a choice here. Do I really give a shit about commercials or football or whatever? Or do I want to know if Jon Snow lives? Like, and that's what kind of separates people, and it helps you find communities, I guess you could say. It's weird that we're getting into this kind of discussion, but it does separate fans in a retrospect, because you find people that you relate to more. It's like, I prioritize Game of Thrones more than I do the Super Bowl. Hey, me too. All right, you're cool with me. Like, same on the other side. It's like, oh, it's just a fucking, you know, it's a fantasy show about fucking sorcerers and shit like that, and a king and all this stuff. This is football. This is live. This is once in a lifetime. You know, the fucking Giants made it again, and whatever. So, and then there's people like, yeah, I'm with you, man. Let's have a beer and watch the game. And that's fine. But the kicker is the showtime, because they're both going head to head. And I think that's what really needs to be contemplated about when you're figuring about a release, is like what you're going up against. What's your competition?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, the only platform so far that I've seen that actually is even continuing to introduce the idea of a showtime, at least in regards to streaming, is like YouTube, because you can set a premiere time for your video.
Yes. Right.
Like, videos for this podcast will premiere usually around like 11 p.m., I think.
That's funny. I schedule it for midnight, but it's midnight my time. So our listeners should note that me and Rainwater are in different time zones. So it's ironic that it will drop for you at 11, but for me, I schedule it to drop at 12 Eastern Standard Time, which explains that, though. But I try to do it midnight at the Spaghetti Factory, and I didn't consider that it's going up against...
That's... Of course.
But that's another thing that goes up with movies is... You're not... So we live in the internet age now, and really there's no fucking excuse for things not to drop at the same time everywhere. But you will get movies that will release a week ahead of time in fucking Australia instead of the United States. And it's like, well, what the fuck is happening? Like, why? And the reason for that is, like, they look at, like, target markets and all that kind of shit, and they factor that in as like, oh... We're gonna get the Australian audience, and you know, so and so's not releasing their movie there until this day or something, like some bullshit like that. So an Australian audience will get it for that, and then a fucking bootleg comes online with spoilers and shit, and then it's a whole thing. But it's kind of crazy that, you know, there's not day and day release. I mean, I understand the time zone thing, which is why like Loki drops at 2 a.m. is because they're waiting for the West Coast to catch up to midnight.
Right.
And that's the whole thing to consider. It's so weird, but all these kinds of things factor into when you do something. So do you prioritize your East Coast audience more than your West Coast audience? I always thought it was weird, like when things start, like live events, like the fucking Oscars, start at 8 o'clock on the Eastern Standard Time. That's what time on at California? That's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They start an award show.
Yeah, I that's an interesting thing to point out because it would seem like it would appear to me that sports tends to favor Central to Eastern Standard Time over, West Coast, right? So that must be part of the overall like schemata for how they figure out release times for these things and how there's this that once you get into like television, there's a whole Byzantine like
advertisers and what time shit airs and nope, because then it's like, oh, the kiddies are out of school, and it's and here's something we also didn't talk about. When you're showing something on TV, it depends on what time you show it at, depends on what you can actually air. You can get away with dropping the word shit, sometimes even fuck, believe it or not, at a certain time of night because of the censors are like, oh, the kiddies have gone to bed, it's the adults watching. Okay, you can have them say F words, or you can show a pair of titties at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday because we know the kids are sleeping. And that's crazy.
Historically kind of a new thing, too, because it used to be like just, an absolute, like you can't have this on television. And then I don't remember when that happened. I think it must have started in the 2010s where they started to kind of allow that to happen more and more. You know what I mean? But like you're saying, there were all these regulations that about preventing what kind of language is introduced, what kind of just like imagery or whatever, brand new territory for television, and they have to kind of do that to compete to a certain extent.
But that's also interesting because then as a creator, when you're looking at your release time or your show time, you know what I mean? Like you say, okay, we're at 11 o'clock. We can do things that other shows can't do. So like I think about shows like Sons of Anarchy. When that show was on, it was coming on later on in the evening. I think it was like 9 or 10 o'clock it would start sometimes. And by the time they got and sometimes they would do like hour and a half episodes. By the time it got to like 10:30, 11, you know what I mean? They could get away with more than they did when they started the first half hour of the show. So the first half hour, there's like maybe a hell, a damn, an ass. And then the second half of the show, you get maybe like a couple more, and then maybe one shit lettered in, and then the next quarter or whatever like that, they're full on dropping F-bombs. And it's like, well, that escalated. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to think about that. But as a creator, you can be like, okay, well, I'm ramping up the tension or the drama in my story. The language that I can use can now get more serious, and the situations can get more serious, and I can tell a story the way it's meant to tell, where I start off a little bit more subtle and a little bit more subdued. And as I ramp up, I can really kind of go where other shows can't. So, I mean, it is kind of freeing to think about stuff like that as a creator.
That is a really interesting way of pointing out like how you deal with creation with the limitations that you have, and especially when your limitations are like loosening over time within the time frame of your episode.
That's crazy to think about. But it's at the detriment, though, because you're also at the thing where it's like, oh, well, it's because we don't have much of an audience at this point in time. We're not pulling in millions of viewers. We're only pulling in a couple thousand. You know what I mean? So it is a gamble still, but it's weird how that kind of detriment creates freedom. I don't know how else to describe it.
No, that does, and I feel like we talked about before about how like restrictions can create sort of a creative freedom in the sense that you can take out things you can take out things to worry about, right? When you have fewer what you can use, you go, okay, well, this is the time where we do the less dramatic scenes. This is the time where we sort of introduce stuff. We're not going to go into intense territory. Oh, it's 11 at this point. We got a half hour to do this. All right, like you were saying, just drop all the F-bombs. Just like, here's where we got all the fight scenes, and you arrange your story around that. And that is one of those things, like, I'm curious for you, Jow, if, like, you yourself have had any particular, like, situations like that where creative freedoms in regards to sort of time have caused you to have to think about how you're going to deal with this kind of situation. If you have any specific examples.
Well, I'm looking at Haunted right now.
Yeah.
It's an independent film with no current distribution, right? It's just me doing a production thing. And right now I'm looking into avenues where I can distribute it. And I already know I'm going to be so I was thinking about this today while I was kind of mulling over what we were going to talk about for this topic. And originally what I was thinking, so I've already discussed that, it's 2020 now, or 2021, excuse me. I plan to film in 2021 and then release in 2022, which will give me a long enough window for post-production, pickups, reshoots, whatever I got to do, all that kind of shit. Make sure all my ducks are in a row. Once October 2023, comes around, I don't know. There are no flags planted at the moment by major studios as to what's coming out in that October area, which is a bad thing and a good thing because I can freely move around my release date right now. So if I see something, if I see that, the second week in October is completely open by the studios, I'm going to aim to drop my movie on Amazon Prime, Vudu, Netflix, that kind of stuff that weekend. That's going to be my target. And then if something comes along, what I was thinking was, well, here's the thing. I have an independent film. Again, I can move it and it's not, nobody's job is being threatened by that. I can move it to September where it's considered a dumping ground and put it in the last week of September. And the benefit of that is there is going to be a horror audience. There's 24/7 horror audience. You look at it now, it's August 1st that we're recording. And there are already Halloween decorations in every grocery store. The Halloween candy is out. Halloween is August, September, October, 3 months away.
There's a release topic to talk about.
Yeah, but
the ever holiday.
But the thing is, there is a hunger for the Halloween season already. So if I drop my film in mid to late September, if there's an empty window right there, that's good for me because the die-hard people will check it out. And if it's, if God's on my side, if the movie gods are on my side and it's good, that word of mouth starts to roll by the time October hits. And then it's like more and more, you know what I mean? Like I'm not wasting time in October and people miss that window because by the time Halloween comes, everyone's going to shift gears into Christmas mode and they're going to be like, oh, I don't want to watch a scary movie. I'm done with, monsters and goblins and shit like that, like next year. And I don't want that. But if I drop too early, if I drop in August, it's like, oh, people might forget about me by the time October comes around. And that's my big window for hopefully generating my audience. So it's a fine line to walk, but the bright side is I have a lot more room than the major studios do because when they're pumping millions of dollars into marketing, that's a big part of release that we need to talk about is the marketing aspect. When you're tying a date to something, that goes on every print ad, every commercial that airs, every trailer that runs in a theater, every, fucking McDonald's collectible cup that's going out there and everything like that. Once that thing is printed, it's there. If you have to change it, you're wasting money, you're changing money, you're confusing your audience, you're losing audience, they get frustrated. Like at the moment, I have zero interest in the new James Bond movie because they've moved it 7 fucking times because of the pandemic.
Right.
They didn't stick to their guns and just drop it at some point, and that got annoying. So for you, I've noticed that for Trailer Park Warlock Season 4, which drops tomorrow, as of this podcast release, you've been doing a little bit of advertising and such by dropping. Is it been daily on your Instagram?
It's been daily. I originally had it to also be on the weekends, and then I forgot one week, and I was like, fuck it, we'll just skip the weekends, come back to it on the day. But basically every day on my social media, I just release like a time count.
Yep.
It's been, I think at this point we're at 6 or 5 days until release. So
But
we're getting there.
when this drops, it'll be tomorrow.
That's right.
We're not going to miss this advertising window. If you're not on Webtoons checking out Trailer Park Warlock by Matthew J. Rainwater, you should.
But I will say there have been, more unusually, there have been some odd synchronicities in the past where I have released episodes that thematically match the like weeks that they're released on. So like season 2, most notably, I had no plans on this. It just happened this way that like the episode where I introduced like this major element in the world where they're like vampires happened on the same, like literally on Halloween. No plans, 0 plans, either for me or the editors, anybody. I just made it.
That's
and
awesome.
It just like by complete coincidence, it just happened to work like that. And there have been a couple other instances like that unfortunately I can't remember as well because the Halloween one stands out the most immediately to me. I will say that I definitely play it a lot looser than most Hollywood studios in terms of like how I think about releasing things. Like I mentioned earlier, it is often based on what I have the time to do within a certain maximum that I'm given. And I imagine for a lot of artists out there who, maybe they're releasing something onto the internet or whatever for the very first time, you don't necessarily have to think about it in the same way that we've been thinking about it, right? Or we've been talking about it. Mostly because that kind of comes with more and more experience as you sort of get into the more and more nuanced aspects of the work that you do. And I say all this because I just want to hit on I want to hit a nail that we always hammer, which is like, just do it. Just pick something. Make it an arbitrary date if you have to. I have made the release date for a season of Trailer Park Warlock on my birthday because it just so happened that it worked out that way. It's like, great, sounds good. Let's do it. It's my birthday. We should release it on my birthday. Or like, because the day that I decided to make and begin releasing episodes of the original like run of Trailer Park Warlock for Webtoon was based on this extremely obtuse like calendar or calculator, I should say, based on this theory that Terrence McKenna had called the time wave theory. And like, I'll just say this, look, if you're interested, look it up. It's the most bizarre crackpot thing that a stoner could come up with. Like, this is a guy who like was trying to crack some kind of mathematical code in the I Ching and discovered that like there was within the pattern there was an endpoint at 2012, and then somebody else picked up this math and found out that there was another endpoint on like July 8th, 2018. And so I picked up that endpoint and I was like, okay, I'll go with that. Maybe it has some special magic juju to it that I can seep off. Apparently it worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but like, be creative with it. It's an opportunity to be creative as well. You don't necessarily have to follow like, all of the tried and trues. You can also you can find creativity in how you release something, whether it's picking an unusual or unique time to release it, or even juxtaposing the time of year at which you release something. So like, I mean, for The Green Knight, it worked for me personally. I ended up going to see it just because I wanted to go see the movie, Does it mean that it would have worked better if it were released in Christmas? Maybe. It's hard to know. It's an opportunity to experiment and see, and with experimentation, you can gather new data and new information and find things that are outside the norm. So, Jow, do you have any thoughts in regards to that whole ramble?
The entire thing that you said, my stance would be the opposite of it.
Sure.
which is you look at something like one of my favorite movies, Hocus Pocus. They dropped that fucker in July. They dropped Hocus Pocus in July. This movie is like dripping with fall atmosphere, and they dropped it in July. Now in 1993, there was not the same, Halloween diehard community that has flourished because of the internet that there is now. So that movie tanked. But because it reruns every October, more and more people get exposed to it, and they found it, and now it's a staple of Halloween. Come around to 2021, they're shooting Hocus Pocus 2. Guess when that bitch is dropping? October 2022, because they've got their shit together now. So sometimes the tried and true stuff is the right way to go. And you just kind of have to level up and hope that you are the cream of the crop. Because I'm looking at things like, it's hard for me to gauge, but the new Halloween movies with Michael Myers, it's very polarizing the way I get it. There's people who love them, and there's people like me who don't really care for them, and I don't really know how that sequel's gonna go. So there's 2 sequels coming out, and I know when it was first coming out, restarting, it was hot. Like, everybody's like, oh, they nailed the tone, and da-da-da-da, it's serious, and, it's got some, oomph behind it, and everybody was excited to check it out, but you're only as good as your last hit, your last at bat. So I'm not sure how it was really received by audiences after it went, because I've heard so many mixed things, so I'm curious to see how the second one will go. And it's not even a pure indication, because people just might be so thirsty for a new movie, a new horror movie at Halloween, or, you know what I mean? Like, it might be skewed by that. But the point of the matter is this. What Rainwater was saying about you can get creative with stuff, you can also go head to head with stuff. So, like, if I got a distributor, they're going to tell me there's no way in hell we should go up against Halloween. It's a juggernaut. It's basically the Marvel franchise of horror movies. Yeah. And my response would be, no, fuck that. Let's take them on. And, financially, that's a bad decision. It just is. But I think that ballsy kind of mentality might be my creative in, where it's like, This movie thinks it's good enough to go against Halloween. Maybe I should check that out as well. Like people who would go see Halloween, if my movie came out as well, those are the type of people that would be like, fuck it, it's 10 past midnight. There's another showing of Haunted in 20 minutes. You guys want to go and just do a double feature, go late into the night? Fucking October, horror movies? Yeah, people are going to do that. They're looking for shit to do on a Saturday night. So I think that there is room to follow the road that's already paved. Just drive a fucking Lamborghini with the windows or the doors up. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can get attention that way. What was the other point that you made about, dropping in a different... about kind of spontaneously picking stuff. So I was going to, and I talked about this in one of our previous podcasts, but I was going to drop the teaser poster for Haunted. Most people who don't listen to our podcast that still follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever have no fucking idea that I'm still doing Haunted. I don't even think my wife realized it yet, to be honest with you. And the truth of the matter is because I haven't advertised it. I was going to drop a teaser poster for Haunted on my birthday. I like to do things on my birthday just because I make it quote unquote Jowly. Not July, Jowly. It's my month. But I came around to the idea of, this is just going to get lost in the shuffle. Nobody's in the mood for this right now, and it's just me making, waving a rattle and hoping someone will look at it. But if I drop this teaser poster near the end of September, kind of like how I was talking about before about stuff, right before spooky season hits, I might be able to gather a little bit more attention for my thing than I would have before. So I might be able to jump the gun then, as opposed to jumping it in the middle of July, and have a better reward for it. So the idea of just, kind of arbitrarily kind of throwing a dart and hoping it'll stick, that can work sometimes. I'm not going to fully disagree with that. I think you are on for something. Because if I dropped a fucking teaser poster for Haunted on Christmas Eve, I think people would notice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if I do anything arbitrarily, it's because I don't have a clear idea of how something functions. So particularly with social media, I have no clue.
Well, the algorithm,
when is a good,
yeah, it fucks with. I try and Google the algorithms
when is a good
and
time
shit.
to release anything
Yep.
on Twitter? You know, because like I can't seem to find for the life of me, I can't seem to find when is peak time that people respond to what I post.
Right.
And maybe I just need to, like, if I really want to get creative with it, just like do a whole week of content, one tweet for every hour, get a spreadsheet, and then just tabulate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then crunch the numbers that way. That
But then,
would, to me, would go ahead.
But it's so weird because, you know, what if Trump declares that he's going to be running again in 2024 or whatever it is, and everybody jumps on social media to comment about it, and then they see your tweet because they're on Twitter because of that. You know what I mean? So there are so many variables that can fuck with things. So it's really weird. But I'm of the same way because I always have the mindset that if I post something and then I delete it and then I like fix a typo and repost it 10 minutes later, I feel like the algorithm goes, no, you just posted. We're gonna kind of bury this one. Yeah. And in my mind, I'm like, would this joke have been funnier if I had just left it with the typo and got more attention? Like, that kind of shit bugs me. I wish I knew the answer to that. And I'm sure it might be in a book, but from what I've gathered by looking up, like, Photoshop dimensions for Instagram, this shit changes every year. Like, they change the algorithms, they change dimensions, they change the format, they change all this stuff. So if you're not on top of the ball constantly, and as creators, it's fucking time consuming enough living a life, eating food, making money, paying the bills, spending time with friends and family, and creating, that if I'm trying to constantly stay on whatever fucking Twitter decides the algorithm's going to be next month, like, I'm going to lose my mind. And there's no real hard data set to tell you this is what it is. This is the best time to do it. I've seen people drop books, and I've read about it. It's like, oh, drop your Kickstarter on a Wednesday night because that's when people's paychecks get deposited, and that's when they're most and it's like all this shit. And I've tried to do Kickstarters, and it's like, well, does my shit suck, or is this book out of date? Like, I don't know. So there's no way of really knowing because, like you're saying, it is a constantly shifting battlefield. And a lot of the times the people who are shifting the battlefield don't even know what they're doing, quite frankly. I don't... who the fuck decided to move the search button from the top of the apps to the bottom? Have you noticed this? Like the little magnifying glass? Like now I have to click on the bottom line?
I did not notice that.
It's sweeping the fucking apps. It used to be, you know, the search function was at the top of the goddamn thing, and it's where you click and type in what you're looking for. Nope, they put the whole menu shit on the bottom bar now, and it's like, why?
So there's some new consulting agency that's going around through all the apps, just being like, hey, new thing, search button on the bottom. We did some research, and research indicates the eye is more led to this particular area of the screen for blah, 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 blah reasons. And that'll change in about a year and some change where it's like, oh, actually just having the search in the middle. That's the best, just the middle of the screen, and have all the content just arrange itself around the search button.
And I think that's the biggest thing is that like release dates and stuff like that are much of the same. There's a lot of science that does go into it where like someone could talk to a scientist and say, or, a statistician, there we go. And they could say, well, if you look at the numbers at this and this and this and this is how it works. But then we're artists, and a lot of stuff goes with gut. And we look at it and we go, no, from the way I talk to people, they're feeling this now. They were feeling different then, and that's why those numbers indicate that. They feel different now, and I think this is where we need to go. So you need to, as an artist, kind of juggle those two different things, the data that says what it was and your feelings about what it is. And that's how you kind of land in a generic area of what you're supposed to do. And I think that's the best way to guess. I hate calling it guessing because it's educated guessing. You know what I mean? You're not just throwing a dart. You're looking at things and you're kind of forming an idea. And that's kind of how you have to approach, your release dates, is you have to look at things. Because when you were putting together a budget for a movie, in the last 20, 50 years or whatever like that, you could pull from genres or like movies from your genre going back past 5 years and be like, hey, I'm making a murder mystery movie and Scream made this much money. And it was acceptable to put that into like a budget proposal. Now, because of the way the release date windows have changed and everything's different now, like streaming, all that kind of shit, you can only go back within a year, maybe 2 years of movies. You can't go 20 years into the past and say, hey, this movie made that, so my movie might make this. Because of the way the release dates have changed and how people are looking at things differently in terms of when they go see a movie or when they consume a content or whatever, the landscape changed as to how you can formulate what you're going to do and, you know, and manage expectations of investors and audience members and, you know, your collaborators and all that kind of stuff. So it becomes a really shifting landscape where you really have to, and this was another podcast we talked about that we've done about trusting your gut. But the important thing is to kind of consume all of the information that's come before. And you can't live by it. It's not biblical law. It's not dogma. But you have to kind of consume it, digest it, and go, okay, I think I know why that worked like that, and guess here. But, you know, the whole app thing with putting the search bar on the bottom, that's a focus group with some dumbass who didn't graduate high school going, oh man, I like it down here because like the Cheeto dust from my lips it gets in the top of my phone and then it's crusty and I can't swipe up there. And some guy took that guy seriously and said, we got to fucking move this thing. And that's why that happened. So, there are educated people who know what the fuck they're doing. And then there's a lot of people who don't. So it's hard and you can only trust yourself. So I think for me, kind of coming towards the end of this, for me, it is a balance of digesting past data and then your artistic gut to kind of gauge where we are. I don't know, Rainwater, what do you think?
I would not argue against the fact that we, as a species, have a hard-built like expectation based on our seasons, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like you talked about this when talking about, making decisions about what kind of food to cook, right?
Yeah.
It's dependent on the weather. It's dependent on how, what time of year it is. So in the same way, it goes into our expectations for the kind of media that we consume.
Yep.
Like we might be more prone to consuming books towards the fall or towards particular times in the summer, I don't know that well about all that information, but it's worth looking into and considering, like, whether or not you're writing a book, making a movie, whatever. There's going to be a particular time of the year where you're going to be able to maximize, when you release that work, and it's going to be based on, this very ingrained sense of time that we have as humans that goes eons back to, agrarian society. And so I'm saying that really to agree with what you were saying earlier, because it's, like I said, it's hard to argue against biology, right? It's our internal mechanisms really do determine a lot of the actions that we take and determine a lot of economic actions. You could very easily make the same argument for how markets perform. There seems to be, at least from what I've seen, there seems to be a sort of cycle with how markets perform based on the seasons, almost like you harvest in the fall and winter are to prepare for the fall and winter, and you plant in the spring and grow in the summer. So anyway, I think those are probably my last thoughts in regards to this topic. And like I said, be creative with it. If you just don't know what to do, if you don't necessarily have to like pick a number out of a hat. You can have something be like Jow was saying. Jow has Jow Eye, or you can have whatever is personally important to you, so that when you do release it, it's significant for you, even if it's not necessarily significant for everybody else.
But I think
so. Anyway, Jow,
I think what you actually did for Trailer Park Warlock with your countdown was the right idea, because that advertising and that marketing is directing it towards you. You have made tomorrow significant by drawing that attention over time. If you had just, shown up, you're not Beyonce, at least not yet, where you can't just show up and be like, hey, new Trailer Park Warlock season drops tomorrow, and everybody goes fucking nuts. That's the goal, to get to that level where you can just do that. I wish I could do that as a filmmaker. Just fucking show up one day and be like, hey, by the way, new movie, drop. And you know what I mean? Like, that shit would be crazy.
Yeah.
But we can't do that as independent artists. And I think a lot of people listening that are independent artists would agree. We have to kind of hype up. We have to be our own hype man for a little while. And that's what's great about what you did. Because you've piqued me. You've had all these, different images. It's different every time you post, and it's reminding me, hey, this is coming up. Hey, this is coming up. This is coming up. You have made that date significant. So now it's like you can create the idea of, and I don't know if this is have you dropped every new season starting in August, or is this just this particular season?
It's this. I'm not sure if I understand your question entirely. So like has every season that I released been in August?
Has it started in August? Yeah.
No, it's been kind of, sometimes it's September, sometimes it's.
But it's in the third to fourth quarter.
That's true. It's in that ballpark for sure. It's always been in that ballpark. Yeah.
So and
not by any major intention.
You're not the only person that does that, though. Like, What We Do in the Shadows, one of the TV shows that I'm fucking obsessed with, is coming back in September. Most TV shows come back in September, but that's the expectation of, this is the kind of area, and you never really know what the start date is. And that's kind of one of the things that's always good, too, is that mystique of not saying when it is, because then people are checking your Facebook, checking your page on Facebook or whatever, or your Instagram for the particular comic, because they want to be kept up on it, and they want to know when it comes in. By withholding that information, you can kind of build your own hype. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, is it coming back? When's it coming back? Like, all those kinds of things will create that demand once you have a bit of an audience, and that's a good way to go about it too.
Yeah, and I think, you were kind of that kind of reminds me of the way that Weird Al would release albums. Yes. Like, he would wait until everybody totally fucking forgot about him, and then would be like, hey, by the way, there's a new album coming out, and then suddenly be like, oh, fucking, that's right, Weird Al exists.
Yeah,
like,
and that was what's so great. But then you also ride that line where it's like Avatar. Aren't there supposed to be like 7 Avatar movies by now, and they haven't?
Yeah.
We haven't even seen a trailer. Yeah. And you run that risk of pissing off people, too. And I don't know how easy it is to get them back after you've pissed them off. The bright side for me was, when I was first promoting Digits back in, oh my God, a decade ago, 2011, we started filming in 2009. I never assigned a release date for it. There was never a release date. I was just talking about digits. When I posted on everything, Digits. Oh my God, Digits. Oh, we shot this. Blah, 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 blah. That by not assigning a actual release date to it, people got so frustrated after a year and a half. They were like, you keep talking about this fucking movie. When is it coming out? Like, when do we get to see it? And by overexposing it, believe it or not, I actually built a hype for the movie. And that was what was interesting. That's what got us to sell out in less than 24 hours, an entire movie theater. And that kind of idea of waiting to release for an audience to have demand. I think that's something that we kind of missed in our discussion today, is hype. That if there's no hype, like if you finish something right now and you say, boom, it's done, and then you just release it, you are really throwing the dice down the drain, hoping they come out the other side the way you want them to. And that's the biggest mistake I think a lot of artists make, is they finish, they publish, it's that instantaneous, it's out there, and then it fucking tanks, and it doesn't get any likes or any attention. And goes back to what we were talking about before. The fucking algorithm just didn't pick you up that day, and all of a sudden you're dejected and you feel like you're a worthless artist and it doesn't mean anything, when in fact you probably created something awesome and just the computer fucked up, or people were distracted by some other bullshit that was going on. But if you can create a hype, like how I did with Digits, how you are doing right now with tomorrow's drop of Trailer Park Warlock Season 4 on Webtoons, you can get people's attention about things. So that, I think, is a big component to release date, is that you have to make sure you are in a position to build hype for your product. So like now, I know after I drop a teaser poster in September for Haunted, I'm not posting shit about it until we start filming. And then once it's filming, it'll be a little bit of information. Hey, look, we're filming. Maybe something here and there, but not too much. I'm not going to jinx it because I advertised Haunted before so much and then nothing came of it. I know my audience is exhausted of waiting. So I'm waiting until I have hard proof. And then the following year, once the fucking thing is in the can, locked, ready to go, and I've got 3 months till October, baby, it is fucking on at that point. Like, that's all I'm talking about is Haunted, Haunted, Haunted. Oh, we won this award. Oh, we did this thing. Oh, we almost had a ghost on set that looked like it was trying to kill our lead actor. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's all I'm going to fucking talk about. And by the time October rolls around, everybody's going to be like, all right, can we see this fucking movie now? Whereas now, I'm not going to make them wait 2 years because nobody gives a shit right now. I care.
Right.
Select people care. But if I can restrain myself from building that hype in contrast to what I did for Digits, which is the hardest fucking thing, I believe it'll be successful. So I think that's the biggest thing that I think artists need to consider when they're coming up with a release date is, can you successfully hype and market and advertise with enough time to to get your thing noticed? Because that's what you want. You want it to get noticed, and that's the whole point of picking a release date. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're making it a holiday. Whatever fucking day we land on, whether it's July or August 2nd or whatever it fucking may be, you hype it up. You got to get the word out there that this is happening then. Not just drop it now, hoping for that instantaneous gratification. You gotta hype it up. You gotta. That's the key. And Rainwater's doing that now with Trailer Park Warlock Season 4 dropping tomorrow on Webtoons. If you're listening to this and it's past August 4th? 3rd?
5th.
5th. Thank you. Yeah. If it's past August 5th, 2021, it's already out, or it started. Excuse me. It's the weekly, right? It's every week.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Catch the fuck up. In case you haven't noticed, I've been trying to hype this entire episode around Rainwater's comic, but you should fucking do it because there's 100,000 people that are subscribed, right?
Quite nearly at this point.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
We're almost in.
100K.
You're almost in the 6-figure range of subscribers. Yes. That's fucking insane.
I'm quite happy.
So clearly, this man is doing something right. So check that out if you haven't. We're running long now, but I also wanted to hype one more thing. In a few weeks, I'm not going to give the date right now, but in a few weeks, Rainwater and I are going to be doing a live episode of Midnight at the Spaghetti Factory. And in this live episode, you are going to be able to ask us questions and see us react and answer them in real time. It's going to be a fun old time. We might even have a guest or two pop in to add to the conversation that can be talked to. But we are going to be live on YouTube, maybe even launch a Facebook page while we're at it. We need to fucking... Did you notice that we don't have a Twitter account for this show? Like, every podcast has a Twitter account. We don't have one.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
We don't have a Twitter. We don't have a Facebook. We don't have an Instagram. We don't have any of that. But I think maybe it might be about the time to start doing that, because I think a live episode could be fun, and we're going to be talking about a topic. But I'm letting you know now that in August, at some point this month, we're going to be going live, and you are not going to want to miss it, because sometimes I edit these episodes and there's some shit that should never go on air that's sitting on my hard drive that won't be able to get removed when we're live. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it doesn't hit the shit hit the fan too much. But that's pretty much this episode on release dates. We hope we've helped you guys out with kind of figuring this out. If you have questions about this particular topic, or you think we missed something, or a comment you would like to throw us, you don't have to tweet us anymore. You don't have to email us, even though we only gave out the email in like the first episode. You can ask us live in a couple of weeks. And to know what that date is, you're going to have to tune in to the next episode or 2. Or 3, or 4. I don't know. But you'll find out when you listen. See you next time.
Later, y'all.